Hi, my name's Phoenix Alexander, and I'm going to be doing a presentation called The Secret to Beautify Your Life. Learn stenciling in about an hour. I'm taking you on a little tour of some of the stencil projects that I have in my home. This is in my dining room, so we'll kind of pan out here a little bit. I love peacocks. They're a little bit like phoenixes. And so this one is actually in my dining room and is the central feature there. I also have some stenciling that leads into the kitchen right here. And at some point soon, I'll probably be adding some peacocks right there as well. So now I'm going to move you to the living room. This is an example of a stencil used to accent art. I'm going to zoom in here and show you what it is that I'm accenting. So here's the stencil. It is the same colors as the embroidered phoenix. This is from China, and it's embroidery on silk. My brother-in-law brought that from China for me, and my sister matted it as a beautiful Christmas present for me. So that's just one way that you can use stencils to beautify your home in a way that you wouldn't necessarily think of. This is a huge mural that I have in my spa as the feature wall where I do massage therapy. Just kind of pan around so you can see the whole thing. There we are. This mural took 3 months to paint. Most of it is actually done through stenciling. Some of the creatures, like this nettle, was done by projecting a clip art image on the wall and then filling it in with paint. So as you can see, stencils play a big part in my home decor, and I'd like to show you how you can do some really fun and creative things with stencils. All right, let's begin. Hi, I'm Phoenix Alexander, and today I'm going to be giving a presentation to you called Beautify Your Life. Learn to stencil in about an hour. There's a lot of ways that you can use stenciling for artistic expression. As I showed you before, I've got a lot of stenciling in my home, and I use it because it looks beautiful. I'm going to show you some of the ways that you can use stenciling for yourself, and we're going to be going over quite a few different kinds of stencils. We'll be talking about how to bring out color and shading and how to consider your light source. We're going to be talking about all of the supplies that you're going to need, and my hope is that you will develop a love and a passion for it the way that I have, and that it will bring you happiness so that you can beautify your life through stencils. So for a moment now, we're going to talk about the supplies that you're going to need. Don't worry about trying to remember it or take notes. There's a resource for you that you can pull off my website called www.livelifeLikeACruise.com, and you're going to look under stenciling class resources. And there you'll find a PDF with the instructions for you how to stencil so that you can remember what we learned today, and also an interesting history of stencils, which I didn't know before I researched it. So this is what you're going to need. First, your basics are going to be acrylic paint, and I have a huge box of acrylic paints. Painting the mural that I showed you downstairs with all of the sea creatures took a lot of paint and a lot of time. So it's going to be a bit of an investment for you to get started, but you're going to use the paints for a very long time. One of the tricks that I use when I store my acrylic paints, because they tend to separate at the top if stored over time, is turn them upside down, and this accomplishes a couple of things. It keeps it so that when you turn them right side up, they're going to help mix that again. You may want to shake them if you haven't used them in a while, or even if they're brand new, they're probably going to settle. But also, if you turn them upside down in your box, it's very easy for you to see quickly what the color is. Because if you'll notice that some of them do have a color dot on them and some don't, but unfortunately the color dot is not always very accurate. So it's easier to see the color if you turn them upside down. I don't have a particularly favorite brand of acrylic paint. I look for the color. That's the most important factor to me, is the color. Now, when you're using your acrylic paint, sometimes you're going to want to thin it a little bit, make it a little more translucent, a little bit more workable. This is a product called Floetrol, Floetrol. And I use this a lot when I need to, let's say, put a background on. If this is my paper palette, and I wanted to put a background on, but I needed it to be kind of translucent instead of real heavy and opaque, I would use some Floetrol, and I would put that on it. Also in my mural, I used Floetrol when I was making the darker shade of water. I still needed it to be more transparent, so I used the Floetrol. So that's a very important thing. There's also smaller bottles of paint extender that you can buy. I just find that this is easier for me to work with. You can get that at your local hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace. It's used with for house paint as well. And the next thing that we're going to talk about actually is the brushes. So these brushes are natural bristle brushes, and you can see that they're flat on the top. They're perfectly flat, and that's really important because you have to have the flat surface to do your stippling and your swirling. So flat brush. This one is actually a 5/8 inch brush, and the larger ones are used as the base coat. So you're going to be taking your stencil, doing the base coat with that. And then you're going to need a variation in sizes because as you work with the coloring and the shading, you need progressively smaller colors paint. Let's try that again. Paint brush to add the shading with your paint. I was trying to look for the size on this. I can't see it. Looks like it is there we go. This one says 3/8 inch. So these are my basics. Now, the reason I have so many is because when you use a brush, the paint's going to be quite dry on the brush to get started, and then as you use it, it dries out. But you need a perfectly dry brush to apply the paint onto your surface, and that is so it doesn't leak underneath your stencil. So you're going to have quite a few brushes if you've got a project that has several colors in it, particularly something like a mural. And then you're going to want another smaller size. This looks like it's a 1/4 inch. Yes. And then this would be the smallest ones for really tiny detail. The other thing that's kind of handy is some of them have a nice round bottom on them. And this is used for, you can dip your paint in it and make perfectly round things for eyes, like the fish eyes or something that you might want to do that's really precise with a circle. You can just use that. So that's the brushes, and I'll talk to you a little bit more. I'll show you how to clean the brushes when we're done. This is your paint reservoir. As you can see, it's been well loved and used. So you would fill that up with water, and it has a place that has a little grate on it that you can clean the brushes that way. You can set them in like that. Now again, you're only going to put your brushes in there so when you're totally finished with using that brush, because once it's wet, you can't use it for a while. It takes a long time, about 24-48 hours for them to dry naturally. You can speed the process with a hairbrush, a hair dryer, if you're in a real hurry to dry the brush, okay? So that's your water reservoir. One of the things you're going to want to invest in is Murphy's Oil Soap. This is the most amazing product for taking out dry paint. And you just put a few drops in it. It's concentrated, as it says here. You'd put it in your water. And then also, when you're finished with your project, you put a little on your brush. And then I actually like to use one of these type paint cleaners. If you can see the side here, it has little spikes on it. And you're going to use that to clean the brush really, really well when you're finished with water. Okay, so those are some of the basics for the paint. I like to use these little reservoirs, paint reservoirs, but you can also use a paper plate. That's a really easy palette. And some people prefer that because it's already a little bit dry and it's easy to not overload your paint on your brush. And your paper towels are a really important part of the process, and you need them to be a thick paper towel that's not going to fall apart when you're brushing it, because you're going to load the paint on and then take most of the paint off. A little counterintuitive, but again, we want a mostly dry brush so that the edges are very clean on our stencil. And I'm going to show you several different projects today. This is just some wood. I bought this at the local craft store to make a little plaque with it. And I used this gold spray paint, just metallic gold. And the raw wood looked like this. So another thing that you're going to need is, right over here, the blue painter's tape. And you want it to be low stick, because that's what you're going to attach your stencil with to your project so that it doesn't move. And that's extremely important. And it's especially important when you're working with layered stencils, because you're going to be putting several layers on and progressively adding paint to those. So you want the low stick paint. You can also use a pencil. A lot of the, well, and I recommend that you make a registration if they don't have them, but most of the layered stencils will have a little hole at the top where you can line up your stencils for each layer. And if they don't have them, I actually recommend that you put some in, take a little X-Acto knife and cut one in. This is a really simple stencil, so you probably don't need it on this, but let's say, for instance, that you were doing a border and it was a one-layer border, but you have to line it up. You're really going to want that registration mark. I'll show you a little bit more what that is. So anyway, you mark with the pencil where you want the registration to be, and then you can take your eraser and take that off later. See if there's anything else that I need to cover at this point. I think I've got that. So in the next segment, I'm going to show you some examples of stencils that I have used and some that I haven't that we'll be using today, and a couple of different stencil projects. So let's get started with that.